I just love being here, and it's such a faith-building church to be in. Just love being here, and I'm really grateful to you for kind of turning out this morning and just being the people of God together. It's encouraging to me, makes me feel like I've been blessed already, and that's really exciting. I'm at Envision tonight as well. I know that will be fun too, so I'm just really looking forward to the whole day. And I don't know, we've got a word up here. You can't see the red guy, can you? Or can you from where you are? I know there is a scary looking red face on the left-hand side, which is, I imagine, Jesus on the cross. I haven't actually read Death by Love, which is really bad, isn't it? So I'm going to talk about this, and it may be nothing at all in concert with what Mark Driscoll believes about it. And if that's true, I apologize. But on the right-hand side, you can see the word Jesus wins. And so what I'm going to do is, I've been asked to speak on the atonement picture known as Christus Victor, which just means Jesus wins. And so if you're new, or if you feel new, or if you're not a follower of Jesus yet, and you're just popping in, checking it out, looking around, probably some of this morning will feel a little bit odd. First time I came into a church like this, I thought it was really weird, and it wasn't here, somewhere else. I thought, this is bizarre, I don't want to be here, I feel uncomfortable. I chatted to somebody in our welcome area recently as a church, so I'm a church pastor, and I said that they're not Christians, they've never been in our church before. I said, what were your impressions of the church? They said, it was a bit like a cult, really. It was great. I spent half an hour chatting to them, and by the end of the conversation, I think they understood why we made such a fuss about worshiping God, and whether or not they believed in him. But so you may be feeling like that, and if you are, and you're thinking, what on earth is the deal here? What is the big picture of Christianity? What are these people here for? That, to me, is my two-word summary of what Christianity is for you. It's Jesus wins. It's Christus Victor, because as soon as theologians get involved, they turn it into Latin. And I don't know whose idea that was, but they went, Jesus wins, everyone understands that, can't have that. Let's turn it into a Latin phrase which no one understands. Christus Victor, and everybody goes, oh yes, wonderful, Christus Victor. But Jesus wins is the summary, in a way, of Christian belief. But I know that in itself doesn't mean very much to you unless you know what it is Jesus has won, who he's beaten, and what it is that means for your life, and how that has any impact on anyone other than him. Jesus won against who? For who? How? And Jesus, I guess the heart of the gospel is that Jesus lived the life that we should have lived and died the death that we should have died and then rose again. And we've already sung about that, so hopefully that will be connecting with you in some way. But Jesus then has conquered everything, this is the Christian message, that is set up against you. Because actually there's a whole lot of things in the world that are opposing themselves to you, whether it's be disease or decay or death or destruction or depression or whatever it might be that's opposing you, and Jesus has defeated all of them to give you victory. And that's the gospel, that's the good news of Christianity. And so I'm just going to try and explain how that works a little bit, and that is the good news of the Christian gospel. That's the gospel of Christus Victor, or Jesus wins. And I guess for some of us, probably many of us, even Christians here, Jesus has won against who, how? Who or what has he defeated? How does it work? How does it apply? And we have to think carefully about biblical pictures. Now, I got into Alan Partridge as a result of meeting people in this church. Now, some of you guys have no idea who Alan Partridge is, but a number of you do. Alan Partridge is a chat show host from about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And if you've ever heard anybody in this church say, aha, which you almost certainly have at some point, it's probably Tom, actually. Alan Partridge is a kind of a silly chat show host. And he had a conversation with a guy once. He was interviewing him. And I just waffle at the beginning, by the way, to get you a chance to adjust to how fast I speak. That's why, silly stories. And Alan Partridge is talking to this guy. He's a Russian spy. At one point, the Russian spy says to him, things had become so difficult that by this point, I became a pawn in a political chess game. And Alan Partridge says, you just became a pawn in the political chess game? That is right. Who are the bishops? He says. And you just realize, when somebody misinterprets a metaphor and tries to fit things, it's like a pawn in the chess game there are no bishops, so I don't interpret the metaphor like that. Sometimes when we find biblical metaphors like Jesus has won, we kind of think, well, has he defeated just one person? And what's the game he's playing? Or you ever wondered who the ransom was paid to? When Jesus redeemed you, think, well, did he pay a ransom to someone? How does this work? We've got to be careful not to push biblical pictures too far and say, who are the bishops? And actually, with the victory of Jesus, we have to understand that actually the picture's bigger than just Jesus was in a one-on-one fight with one guy. Victory for me, battle picture, implies two guys, back to back, marching away like this, and then turning around and firing, and one of them wins, one of them loses. Or it implies a running race. I've got to enact a running race. How many people here would like to know who would win a running race out of Roger Eaton and the back from London today, Andy Chevalier? Anybody be interested to see who would win? Is Dodge still here? Or is Dodge scurried out and hidden somewhere because he knew I was going to do that? Okay, anybody think that Hugh Pearce would be an excellent substitute? Okay, Andy Shev and Hugh Pearce. If you just want to just make your way up here. Hugh, you may want to take off your jumper, I don't know. Or is it one of those all-in-one jumpers that's part of the shirt in a profound way? Okay. Now these two guys are they're going to leg it. They're going to run as fast as they can. You're going to have to move your feet if you're at the front. It's just going to be a simple 1, 2, 3 go, just a complete lap if you would, without going out the room, and then back round that far round side, and the first person up here wins. Okay, if you want a slight head start, you need to be on the outside, Hugh. Okay, so maybe for an attempt to cheat, if you just stand here, and Shev stands there, then you get a slight head start, but you are on the outside, and that means that he's got the inside track. Okay, are you ready? Are you steady? Let's go! It's going to be a battle at the end. There's a lot of yanking and pulling. And Hugh's one on the inside. Hugh is barging around on the inside. Oh, it's pretty intense, but Andy Shev has the lead. Oh, now, very good. Now, if it was simply a one-on-one race, you guys would now think, how does this is Andy Victor, okay? Chevalier Victor, or Andy wins. That's the gospel of this race. And you would then look at that race and say, why does the fact that Andy beat Hugh have any significance for anybody else? Because we tend to think about this as an individual one-on-one, Jesus versus something. But how does that victory in any way have any impact on me or my life? And it's important to ask that question and understand why. But now let's say that Andy, because he vaguely resembles him, is in fact Jesse Owens running in the American relay race, the anchor leg of the American relay race in 1936 in Berlin. Some of you will know Jesse Owens, who's an African-American guy who ran the anchor leg of the American relay race in Berlin in 1936, and it's famous because it was the Hitler Games. And some of you will have heard of Jesse. How many? You heard of Jesse Owens? Okay, great. So now imagine that Andy is Jesse Owens, and now think through again the significance of his victory over the German competitor, Hugh Pearce. Boo, etc. Okay? I want you to see how a victory can have a lot more significance than simply that Andy just got over the race line slightly earlier. You see, because if Andy was Jesse Owens, he's won an individual victory, he's beaten Hugh. He is better than Hugh. Well done. But it also has significance for the team that he's running, because he's running as part of a relay race where he gets over the line, and so all 4 people in his team win because he's faster than the other guy. It also has significance for him for the rest of his life. He remains the most successful Olympic track athlete until Carl Lewis. So Carl Lewis, some of you will remember, in 1984, won 4 track golds. No one had done that since Jesse Owens. So it's a lasting victory that lasts for his entire adult lifetime until somebody else gazumps him kind of 50 years on. It's also got significance for Black America, because when he wins, remember that black people in America don't have equal rights in an awful lot of the country. And I couldn't believe this, but when I looked into it, Jesse Owens had to get the freight elevator to his own ticker tape parade at the Waldorf Astoria, because he wasn't allowed to intermingle with the whites, and even on his team, he couldn't travel in the same way as the whites. So actually, his victory's got significance for black people in the whole of America in the 30s. It's also got significance for Adidas, because Adidas had never approached an African-American man to do anything, and they approached him just before the Olympics, and he won 4 golds, and Adidas got catapulted forward as a major global brand. And it's also got significance for, if you like, the whole world of people who believe in equal rights for blacks and whites versus Nazi racism and Aryanism and white supremacy. So do you see, and because that's why it was so significant, it being in Berlin against Hitler. Now, in other words, one person's victory, he gets over the line a couple of yards quicker than Hugh, the loser. And you think, well, what significance has Andy wins got to anything else? But when you see it in the big story of what's going on, you realize that one man's victory can have catatonic effect, massive global implications for millions and millions of people because of what he's accomplished and the big story it fits into. And I want to put it to you that the victory of Jesus accomplishes something much more like Andy than like just a one-on-one race between Andy and Hugh, if you like. It's Jesse Owens. It's that global significance, the reach of his victory on our behalf. And what we're going to do is just look at a few places where the victory picture comes up in the New Testament and see how it is that victory is applied to you and me. So it's not just a one-on-one. It's not just Jesus fights death, for instance, wins, and it's got no relevance for anybody else. It's not a 100-meter race. It's not a dogfight. It's not a walking away gunfight, let's see who shoots who. It's a victory that's got massive implications for the rest of the world. I want to say, funny enough, the Greek word for winning, which is Nikao, from which we get Nike. Anybody got Nike stuff on? Kind of victory tick. Okay, well, that's the Greek word for winning is Nikao, and the word for triumph is triumbuo, and the two words in Greek which only appear a combined total of 7 times in the New Testament. So actually, considering the significance of this picture, it's actually not very commonly mentioned, but we're going to look at each one of them. And so you can do that. You can look at all 7 of those in the course of a morning talk and just see how the victory of Jesus actually works. And as we go through them, I think we're going to see 5 different ways in which the victory of Jesus works and accomplishes things for other people. So this will be quite full-on study if you've never been in a church before. I realize that. You kind of think, oh, this is like being back at school. But I hope what you'll see is some of the significance of why people make such a fuss about Jesus. Because his victory, like Jesse Owens' victory, applies to many others and not just himself. And those 5 things, I'll just throw them out all in a row now, and then we'll go through them one at a time. He deleted accusations. He disarmed all rulers and authorities. He delivered us. He defeated death. And he distributed victory. Those 5 things. And the first 2 victories, if we just put up the first slide, the one that comes up after this, in Colossians chapter 2, verses 13 to 15. The first 2 of those victories appear in this brief passage, which is a letter Paul wrote to a church in Colossae in the early 60s AD. He said, "And you, who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses." How? "By cancelling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, and he nailing it to the cross, he disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him." Now, the first aspect of Jesus' victory that you can see there is that he deleted or cancelled or overwrote all the accusations against us. He cancels, he sets aside a record of debts that's against us by nailing it to the cross. That is a legal victory. Okay, so Jesus wins a legal victory on your behalf. Okay, I quoted Alan Partridge, so for those who don't like Alan Partridge, Edmund Blackadder might be more your cup of tea, I don't know, maybe some of you don't know who he is either. But Rowan Atkinson was Edmund Blackadder, and he's telling a story about a brilliant lawyer in Blackadder Goes Forth, and he tells a story about a brilliant lawyer who described his most famous case. He said, a man was found next to a murdered body, he had the knife in his hand, 13 witnesses had seen him stab the victim, and when the police arrived, he said, "I'm glad I killed him." And the lawyer not only got him off, but he got him knighted in the New Year's honours list, and the relatives had to pay to get the blood washed out of his jacket. You know, that's a significant legal victory for somebody who was guilty as anything. Now, Jesus finds people like you and me who are as guilty as anything and manages to win such a profound legal victory that he gets us off. But he doesn't do it by lying to the judge. He does it by taking all of the accusations against you, which are true, and nailing them to the cross with him. And saying, so now the accusations which were valid because it was true to say that you had sinned. You and me, I was guilty of high treason, murder, adultery, stealing, lying, conspiracy to overthrow the true king, which is God. And who knows what else. I was accused and I was guilty, but at the cross, all of those charges were kind of nailed to the cross with Jesus. So he bore them on my behalf, so I got acquitted, exonerated, totally set free. Our criminal record was nailed to the cross. It was deleted, cancelled, expunged. You know, you get amnesty from everything that you had. You get a guarantee of immunity from prosecution. You know not only that you've escaped what judgment was rightfully yours, but the judgment that was rightfully yours has gone onto someone else, so you are now legally completely free. Your criminal record's been wiped. So now anybody comes up to you, and you probably know that the word the Satan means the accuser. So when the Satan comes up to you, whether it comes as it's like a demonic spirit, or whether it comes up just as a person in normal life, accusing you, or your own thoughts accuse you, you did this, you are awful, you messed up, you're never going to make it. And those accusation thoughts come to you. If you have been baptized into Jesus, you are able to say, yeah, I did break the law, I did offend God, but Jesus won. Jesus wins. So those accusations over me have been nailed to the cross and actually undone. So yes, it was true. You don't say, oh no, I'm perfect. You don't argue back in a kind of way, no, that wasn't wrong. You say, yeah, it was wrong. Lucky me that Jesus won. Because if he hadn't, those accusations would still be hovering over my life like a sort of cloud that follows me everywhere. But they're not. They've been nailed to the cross, set aside, cancelled, expunged. I'm exonerated, let off, free. Wonderful. That's the victory of deleting the accusations. He cancelled. You see the word, cancelling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. So important to see that and understand that the victory is not simply a military picture, it's actually a legal picture as well. He won a court case on your behalf by becoming the accused as well as, in that picture, he effectively becomes the accused person as well as you. And he ends up liberating you by bearing the charges himself. So that's what it means Jesus wins. That's the first aspect. He deleted accusations. The second aspect's in the same passage. So read on. It says, this he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. Now this verse is a little bit ambiguous because we don't know who the rulers and authorities are. Or we might wonder who they were. Okay, so some people would say, rulers and authorities, it's all about demonic powers. It's about demons. The cross is like a big heavenly battle. It's Jesus on this side versus demons and Satan on this side. And so there's this fight. There was a song in the 1980s by a guy called Carmen, who was this American singer. Some of you may have heard of him, most of you probably haven't. But I remember listening to it, and it was a really kind of powerful and quite funny reconstruction of the cross as a battle between Jesus and demons. And it would these demons all had voices like Gollum. They were like, yes, Jesus, we're going to get you, kind of thing. And Jesus would go ahead and make my day. It was this very kind of dramatic, literally that line was in the song, and it was beyond cheesy, but at the same time quite interesting and quite fun. And it was saying Jesus is like a battle against demons. And actually, to say that he disarmed rulers and authorities, that view would say, is basically that Jesus rendered them without any weapons. So, Tom, you just stand up a second. So imagine Tom has got a knife and he's running for me. And he's like this, coming straight for you. You need to be able to see your face because the sheer terror, thank you. He's running for me. And actually what Jesus does is to disarm. He basically handcuffs him, removes them. So Tom is now still able to make grimacing faces at me. And he might be scary, because I might think, goodness me, that's a scary face, I better run away. But he doesn't actually have any power. Now that's true, right? So my relationship to a demon is that they may well be very scary to me, as you can see Tom making... That's a rabbit, not a demon, I think you'll all agree. Okay, but let's say Tom was a little scarier than he is. Okay, so he might intimidate me, and I might be fearful of him, but actually when I know what's happened at the cross, I realize he's got no power at all. He's just like, you've got no power. You don't have a knife. There's no hands. You're chained. You have been disarmed at the cross. Okay, so you may now sit down and work on your scary face, I recommend. Your girls are going to get old enough. You're going to need to be scary soon enough. It's like, they're making a rabbit face at them. Anyway, so one view would be, this is talking about demonic powers. It's Jesus versus demons, and he has disarmed them. And I think that's true, in part. Other people would say, no, we don't need that. Demons, they weird people out. Quite a lot of people in here probably still going, I'm not sure I believe in demons. Actually, a lot of people would say, no, we don't have that. The rulers and authorities are Caesar and his armies. Now, the Bible's clear, demons exist. And actually, that's just a reality of life. And so what we've just described is true, that Jesus disarmed demons and all powers who would set themselves up against him. But it also includes, I believe, political rulers and authorities because of the word all. He disarmed which isn't there. I better be careful now, hadn't I? Okay. Let's just scrub that bit for the tape. Thanks, guys. It won't go on the internet. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. I've lost credibility now, so I'm just going to talk for a minute. You guys just listen. This is very good for my humility, I'm sure. He disarmed rulers and authorities, and I don't think you can narrow it to simply Satan and his demons, because actually there are other rulers and authorities who aren't demonic forces. So Satan and his demons are matched, if you like, by Caesar and his armies and all the people who would try and destroy Jesus or destroy you, for that matter. And they're also rulers and authorities who Jesus has disarmed. So in the first century, the rulers and authorities that you'd see most obviously as you walked around Israel would be Roman legions. And they had a brutal way of destroying anybody who set themselves up as a rival authority. They would come in and they'd either fight, if it was a massive army, they would just fight a very efficient battle. They would destroy you. They'd have far better weapons than you. They'd wipe you out completely. And then one of the generals would stand at the end and shout, Roma Victor, like happens in Gladiator. Roma Victor. And everybody would go, hey, we've done it and we've destroyed them. They'd kill you. Or if you were an individual or a series of insurrectionaries, they might go one further. They might say, no, we will capture you and we will crucify you. That's how we'll display that we are in charge and you are not. And that's how the Romans would work. So have you seen Spartacus? As you walked into Roman cities, anywhere in the Roman-occupied world, you might well find crucified people lining the streets as if to say, Caesar is in charge and you're not. So please don't mess with us. That's, it's like what we used to do in Britain when you put heads on spikes on London Bridge. It's the equivalent of that. Only they used to do it with crucifixion. It was excruciating and grim and disgusting. And so the cross of Jesus was meant to be just like that. The cross of Jesus was meant to be the rulers and authorities subjecting Jesus to open shame and public humiliation by triumphing over him. It was their way of saying, as we nail this guy up here, this man thinks that he's Lord, but he's not. And so Pilate's making a sick joke when he puts above his head, this is Jesus, King of the Jews. Look, anybody else? Any other kings of the Jews you want to take us on? Okay, this is what will happen. You will die an excruciating death at our hands, naked, bleeding, and stripped and humiliated. That was the cross. That, from the Romans' point of view, that's what they're doing. When they're banging nails into him, they're saying, we are defending the empire by doing this because we're displaying what happens if you mess with the Romans. It's the sign of our victory. It's the sign that Caesar is Lord. And in one of the most ultimate ironies in the whole of history, that cross becomes the symbol, not that Caesar is Lord, but that the Messiah is Lord. It becomes that Jesus is Lord and Caesar is not, and not the other way around. You see, Colossians are saying it wasn't Jesus, ultimately, that was disarmed and stripped and humiliated at the cross. It was the armies of Caesar. It was all rulers and authorities, because as he stood there and took the worst that they could throw at him, the Caesar, the centurion, sin, Satan, everybody, the Son of God comes through it and still comes up smiling on Easter Sunday. He said, what else have you got to throw at me? I have disarmed, stripped, and humiliated Caesar and all rulers and authorities, even as it looked like they were disarming and stripping and humiliating me. And so now Christians look at the cross, and instead of saying Roma Victor, say Christus Victor. Say Jesus has won. Do you see the challenge of that language? It's saying the cross and the cry of Roma Victor were meant to be the two great symbols of Rome's authority, and they both became the ultimate raspberry to Rome as the Christians proclaimed them and said, look, here we have a crucified Messiah, and he's still won. So what else are you going to throw at us? What have you got next, guys? And so they went around the Roman-speaking world proclaiming a crucified Messiah, as if to say, if you can't beat him even with your greatest weapon, what do you think you've got to threaten us with? Jesus wins. He disarmed the rulers and authorities. Thirdly, he delivered us. If we just put up the next text, this is Revelation 5 and verses 5 and then 9. And I want you to see the parallel between these two. Revelation 5 verse 5 says, weep no more. One of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered. And that again is the word Nikao, as in Nike, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. So John is having a vision of how history really looks when you pull back the curtain and look backstage. And he sees this astonishing moment where he says the one who is worthy to open the scrolls is this conquering lion. He has won, and therefore he's able to bring history to its completion. But won what? And what's he won? He's conquered. Conquered who? Conquered how? What does it mean? And the reason I say that this is about delivering us, the third victory is that Jesus delivers us, is because of the parallel with verse 9. Which if you read now, they sang a new song, this is just a few verses on, saying, worthy are you to take the scroll and open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you've made them a kingdom and priests to our God. So verse 5 says, Jesus has conquered, and therefore he can open the scroll and its seals. Don't worry if you're not quite sure what they are. We don't have time to go into it. But you can see the parallel. Jesus has conquered, and therefore is worthy to open the scroll. And in verse 9, it says Jesus ransomed people for God, and that's why he's worthy to open the scroll and its seals. Do you see the parallel? So I believe that the writer is saying the victory of Jesus is actually about his deliverance of everybody who is in Christ. That's all of you who are Christians. So the victory of Jesus doesn't stop at, I've defeated Satan. It's actually, I've ransomed you. I've rescued you. I've delivered you. So we have to ask, how does that work? How does anybody's victory ransom anybody else? See, Andy beat Hugh, but it didn't ransom all of Black America. It took them 30 years to get there. It didn't ransom everybody who was in slavery and oppressed by white supremacists. So it hasn't actually in itself didn't accomplish all of those things, but Jesus' victory did. It didn't just lay the foundation for victory, it actually accomplished victory. So this actually we're going to understand that ancient battles would often work this way. So if you've seen the film Troy, anybody seen the film Troy? Okay, good, quite a lot of you. Some nodding. Well, at the beginning of that film, the two armies are opposing one another. No, it's not Greece and Troy, is it? It's Greece versus somebody else. I can't remember who they are. Sorry? Alexander? I don't think so. Okay, there's a good battle there, Tim says. So, mental notes. Watch Alexander if you want a good battle. But no, there's a battle between Greece and some other random, I can't remember who the state is. But what they do is, rather than wiping one another out and all killing everybody, they come to an agreement that one of their champions will fight each other. And so this other nation, and we don't know who they are, the leader of this nation shouts out this name, and this enormous 7-foot-high guy trundles out to the front, stands there to defy the whole nation, and he just looks like an absolute beast. And then the Greek leader shouts out, Achilles! And eventually Brad Pitt comes forward, and the two of them fight one another on behalf of their whole country. And of course, you would know, you're never going to get Brad Pitt killed in the opening minute of a film, so you know he's going to win, and he runs in and sort of flies through the sky with the greatest of ease and plunges his sword into the guy. The guy dies, and Greece all win against this other nation and take them as their slaves. In other words, Brad Pitt's victory is appropriated or gained by the whole nation because he represents them. It's actually exactly what happens in the story of David and Goliath. Isn't it? David goes forward representing Israel. Goliath represents the Philistines. David wins, so the whole nation wins. And Jesus' victory is like that to us. Jesus goes out one-on-one against Satan, death, sin, Caesar, everybody else, and defeats them on our behalf. And that's why the writer is able to say, that's why the crowd sing, you ransomed people from every tribe and nation, because your victory was accomplished on behalf of us, and you have delivered us by winning. It's not just that you've won a one-on-one. You've defeated others on our behalf, and therefore we win as well. So that's Jesus not only deleted accusations and disarmed the rule and authority, he also delivered us. Fourth one, Jesus defeats death. Next slide. Jesus defeated death. He deleted accusations, disarmed authorities, delivered us, and then defeated death. 1 Corinthians 15, 54 to 57. When the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. Oh, death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, this is the fullest passage in the Bible about the resurrection, so it's important. And these verses are the bits that the whole chapter has been building up to. And to translate the bits in quotes, it's basically, and Yabu sucks to death. That's what, it's a raspberry, it's a taunt, it's a, you see, death, no, come on, who are you, who are you? It's that kind of tone, isn't it? Death is swallowed up, oh, death, where is your victory? Come on then, let's see what you got. That's the kind of tone. It's like a football kind of stalls chant to say, death, you've got nothing on me, have you? Jesus has defeated you, so no. I mean, it's almost Paul allowing himself to be a little bit playful as he quotes the Old Testament saying, this is a truthless enemy we fight now. Death itself has lost its sting. And it's a wonderful picture because it talks about death being swallowed up in victory. Well, in the Old Testament, death was the swallower. Death was the thing that swallowed everybody, right? You're all going to be swallowed by death one day. And that was the swallower, and in this picture, Paul is saying, no, the swallower has become the swallowee. Death itself has been swallowed by someone else. Death is more powerful than you, but Jesus is more powerful than death, so death, which would beat you, has been beaten by someone else. And it's limping around now without a sting. You have a bee, imagine a bee loses its sting, it loses pretty much its whole hindquarters, and it just hobbles around and eventually collapses. Now, I'm not sure Paul's got a bee in mind, but that might help you visualize what he's saying. It's lost its sting. You imagine a bee trying to scare you away from its nest or something, but it doesn't have a sting. It's like, oh no, I've lost my sting. It's slowly dying and crumbling because I've got no sting. Therefore, I've got no power. And Paul was saying, no, the sting of death was the law. But you've been liberated from the law, and you've been liberated from sin, so what's death going to do? It's like a bee without a sting. It's got absolutely no power at all. Can look scary, but it isn't. Because Jesus has defeated it. So Jesus, this is historical record, right? Jesus on what's probably the 7th of April, AD 30, dies, and gets buried in a tomb. Lots of historical evidence for that. He then, 2 days later, the tomb is empty. Lots of historical evidence for that. Even non-Christian scholars would agree, no, the tomb was empty. And lots of people report seeing him alive afterwards. You can go to the British Library and British Museum and look at documents dating to within 100 or so years of this event saying Jesus was not there. These are the testimonies of people who said they saw him alive. And the best explanation of those things then, as now, is that Jesus is alive. And he conquered death. So it's a historical reality, right? It's not just an article of faith that we believe because we've got nothing better to do on Sundays. It's us realigning our lives with the truth of something that happened in history, which is that Jesus actually did de-sting death. It swallowed it. It said, I'm the only person ever to go one-on-one with death and win. And that means death has been beaten. Jesus fought death and Jesus won. So death had beaten all comers until the Messiah comes, and now death has been undone by the accomplishment of Jesus. And so death is now kind of like that. You know, the villains in films tend to die very slowly, don't they? It's like the guys in the orange boiler suits who are kind of the villain henchmen, they get shot and they suspiciously always die straight away, don't they? And it's like there's not even they just don't make a noise. But when the villain at the end gets shot, for some reason he crawls around going, for about 5 minutes, and there tends to be a lengthy conversation and discussion of the weather and all this, while they're dying, sort of saying, as they're able to have this final scene. And death is kind of like a villain like that who's been mortally stabbed, is on his way out, but he's still there, because actually you and I'm still expecting, unless Jesus comes back, I'm still expecting to die. But death is kind of grabbing hold of people as he goes down and saying, I will, like Boromir when he dies in The Lord of the Rings, and he just takes so many people with him, doesn't he? Death is like that. Death is like, or imagine someone falling out, like Alan Rickman at the end of Die Hard, the last enemy, and he just has that, almost like Tom's faces he made earlier, actually. And you remember as he's falling, you kind of think he would want to grab as many people as he could and pull them down with him. Well, that's what death is doing, but death has been defeated. Now he's still kind of rolling around, just grabbing hold of who he can, but he has been undone. And death is the last enemy to be destroyed. The big villain always gets killed at the end. Right? If Alan Rickman had died in 5 minutes into Die Hard, there wouldn't be a film, would there? But actually at the very end, death is ultimately destroyed. And that's what we're waiting for to happen now, is for Jesus to return and say, right, your time's up. I've had enough of you crawling around on the floor, pulling people down with you. You're over. Death has now been swallowed up in victory. Jesus wins. So Jesus wins by deleting accusations, disarming authorities, delivering us, defeating death, and finally by distributing victory to us. And I just felt as we were praying before the meeting that this is the bit that might set some people free this morning. This is the bit that you might not have realized. Because we've only found 5 of the 7 occurrences in the New Testament of Nikao or Thrimbayu. We've seen a lot of them, but we haven't found them all. Because 2 of them don't refer ultimately to what Jesus did at all. They refer to us. And they're these. 2 Corinthians 2 verse 14 first. It says, but thanks be to God, who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. We share in Christ's victory parade. That's the picture. We are the spoils that Jesus has won. Jesus wins, and as a result of that winning, that victory, we end up kind of as part of his victory parade as the spoils that he shows us to the world and says, this is what I've won in my battle. And we are part of his triumphant procession, his triumphal procession. And the picture's kind of obscure. Those of you who have read about this in detail, that there are some interesting bits and pieces about it, which we don't have time to go into, but I hope you can see the heart of it, that we are in the triumphal procession of the Messiah. And then the second text, and then the final one, which I want to look at, is Romans chapter 8, 35 to 37. And this will be familiar to you, but I want you to see where the word comes that talks about winning. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ, says Paul? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it's written, for your sake we're being killed all the day long. We're regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And what's powerful about that is that the victory of Jesus is shared with us. And so you might think, well, where's the word win appear there? But in the word more than conquerors, it's actually, we've put it down as a noun in our English translations because it's easier. We are more than conquerors, but what Paul actually wrote was, we over-conquer, or we super-conquer. The word is hupernikao, which is kind of to win with hyper at the beginning. We hyper-win, or we super-win, or we over-win, or we more than conquer, hence the translation. And so actually what Paul is saying is, look, we are super-conquerors. We are over-winners. Right? It's not just that we win, it's that we walk in a life of permanent, ultimate victory. There's nothing that can then come and get us, because if we can't be separated from the love of God, even by death, right, we're like sheep to be slaughtered. The Word of God says, you know, you and I, a sheep to be slaughtered is not a nice picture. That's you and me going, meh, 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 into the slaughterhouse. Oh no, the end. Dun, 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 dun. That's our journey. This is what Paul says. That's our life. We are bleating, heading towards a certain death. And you and I think, how can that be victory? Paul's point is, if even in that we cannot be separated from the love of God and are guaranteed a permanent resurrection with him, then how can anything have any power over us? How can, if I can defeat death by being inseparable from God, how is any one of death's henchmen? You know, if it's like, if I've already defeated Alan Rickman, then what are his other baddies going to be doing to me? They've got no power at all. They're toothless. They're disarmed. They are defeated. And Paul uses this extremely strong word, hupernikao, to say we over-conquer, we super-win through him who loved us. How could we not? If death's been defeated, and if all death can ever do is to unite you and me with Jesus instantly, what else has he got? Do you see? If what death accomplishes when he finally gets you is to unite you permanently with the resurrected Christ, and with a guaranteed hope of a permanent bodily existence on a creation with no sin, no sickness, no tears, no death, no nothing, and redeemed creation, if that's the worst that can happen to you today, right, you get hit by the bus, that's the very worst thing that happens to you. How on earth has death got any weapons against you? Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? We are united with him, and that's why we super conquer through him who loved us. It's like Obi-Wan. Strike me down, I'm going to become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And that's where Paul is coming from. Not quite. I imagine some of you will notice. Trying to destroy a Christian with death is like throwing water on a chip pan fire. You know, it looks like a good idea. You think, oh, fire, let's throw water on, but as any of you studied it know, that's the last thing you do to a chip pan fire. You only give it more power, you give it more blaze. That's what death is like to you and me. Death comes as, it looks, oh quick, we better snuff out the Christians, let's throw water on it, and it actually only adds to the blaze, the intensity, the heat, the power of the believer. What else can you do? Or it's like trying to destroy a dandelion by blowing. You used to do that as a kid? You think, oh, I don't want one of them. And you blow on it, and by doing it, you just spread its life. That's what happens when Christians get killed. So you just spread the life. There's nothing. The worst that can happen to you is you get united with Jesus forever. Jesus' victory, like Jesse Owens, is so sweeping that it carries all of us with him. And I believe that God wants to impress that on our hearts. And you be aware that you knew that Jesus won, and you knew that that applied to you because he forgave you. But I think there's a lot of people here who may well still really struggle with either the fear of death for themselves or just death of others who they've known. And it's not just a question of grieving, which is a very godly, right thing to do. It's actually a sense of fear. You're unsure. You're not talking like Paul does because you don't realize that actually your life was always that of a sheep to the slaughter, but that when you got there, there was nothing death could do to you except unite you with your Lord and Savior. I just believe God would want to just liberate some. Just believe God, I don't know who that is. I don't know how it applies. It probably may well be personal for you. You're worried about your own death, or somebody close to you, you're worried about them dying. But God would just want to liberate you and say, we are hyper-conquerors. We are over-winners because of Jesus' win, because of Jesus' victory. So that's something of what we mean when we talk about Jesus wins, Christus Victor. We're saying he deleted all the accusations that stood against us. We're saying he's disarmed all the rulers and authorities, like them toothless without any weapons at all. He's delivered us and given us freedom by fighting as our representative like Achilles and emerging victorious. He's defeated death, like leaving the baddie still struggling around, dying at the end, but he's defeated death permanently and secured for you and me an inevitable resurrection. And he's distributed that victory to us, allowing us to share in triumph in his life and be more than conquerors through him, even in his death. Jesus wins. It's good news, isn't it? It's amazing, the gospel. I'm just going to ask Rob and the guys to just come out. We're going to have a brief time of responding in worship, and I know we'll break bread and hand back over to Tom. But could we just I know people always talk when you do this. I just ask if that's possible, to be as quiet as possible, just to stand together so that I'm just able to, just want to hear what God's saying really and make sure that we close in the right way. I think it's obviously not rocket science to say, in a room this size, there'll be a number of people here who right now are not following Jesus with their whole lives. Some of you have never followed Jesus with your whole life, and you're not even sure you want to, but enough has stuck today that you're starting to get a little bit unsettled by what you currently believe. And you may think this needs a bit of investigation. You know that you're not following Jesus, and you didn't think you were, but you kind of feel like something may be right about this. And if it's true that historically Jesus is alive, that actually matters for you, and you need to find out whether it's true or not. And there are other people here, you're not following Jesus with your whole life, and you used to. You did at one time, you turned your life over to him, but stuff's happened, you've had other things in your life have replaced him as the object of your purpose. And they've displaced him and they've wrestled with him, and you almost feel like they've won at the moment. And if somebody was to ask you what's the most important thing in your life right now, you wouldn't be able to honestly look them in the eye and say Jesus is. I don't know which of those two you are, but I'm just going to ask, can we just close our eyes? I and the elders, I'm sure, will have their eyes open, but other than that, no one will. And you don't know me, so it doesn't really matter what I think about you. But I just believe if you're in one of those two categories, it will be helpful. I'd like to pray for you. And I just ask you to raise your hand and wave at me now so I can see who you are. If you're one of those two, okay, there's a bunch. That's great. Now, just hand up high so I know who you are. It's just good to I just want to be able to pray for you. There's 5, I'm not sure, maybe more. But I just want to pray for you right now and ask that God would give you the right steps to take now. Father God, I thank you for the victory of Jesus. I thank you for what it means for everyone who isn't a believer in Jesus. I thank you that the victory of Jesus means that anybody who turns around from their old life and says, I trust this guy, gets their entire accusation history wiped out instantly and gets all those accusations defeated and gets everlasting life with you, not again in a mystical spirit world, but in a bodily resurrection. That means that all suffering has been destroyed. And I thank you that's not just a theory. We are as alive when we respond to you as you are today. Empty tomb behind us. We praise you for that. And Lord, I ask that those people here who are responding for kind of the first time, or they're saying, I want to find out more, you would guide them, Lord, even as they go to the back, as they chat to somebody, as they talk to whoever brought them here, as they just mingle and sort of work it all out, you'd guide them to the right books, the right things to read, the right websites, whatever it might be, that you would help them see the truth of your resurrection and what it means for them. And Lord, for those for whom this is maybe even a regular thing, where they're aware that they, again, are coming to you today and saying, yeah, he's not central. I wish he was, but he's not. Lord, I just ask that you would both forgive their sin as they repent now in their hearts and in their words, and that you would not only forgive their sin, but you would, again, fill them with your spirit to walk in newness of life to the glory of your name. And you would give them courage to be accountable to somebody, whoever, whatever, whenever, wherever, about whatever issue it is that is displacing Jesus at the center of their lives. I know that's going to be big for them. I know it's going to be hard, but Lord, I ask that you would give them the application of this morning. You would stir their hearts and you would rescue them. In Jesus' name, and because you're glorious and we love you and you won, and we don't want anything to make it look like you didn't in our lives or anyone else's. Amen.